Here's what I got. I'm getting around to finally, getting to the last piston here, and decided to make a video on how I go about cleaning the piston and installing it. So here's one of the tools I use. This is the first time I've used this one, and it works pretty good. I got it for cheap offline. It's kind of tapered right here. It's really nice. You just set it to the cam on the piston skirt, and that's it. Piston slides right in, and it so far so good. So I like it. There's one tool. I use speed wrenches for the connecting rod bolts, and a couple of screwdrivers just in case, and of course the wooden handle of a small hammer. This is what I use for pre-lubing the bearings, and I got it to where I just poke a hole in the top and then I just squeeze it. It's really easy. It's clean that way. And this right here, this is this right here, this is gasoline and ATF. Now, why, you're probably wondering why I use gasoline and ATF. Well, first of all, there's probably like a gallon and a half in there, and there's 3 quarts of ATF. And the reason why I do that is because ATF is a solvent, it's a cleaner, and I like it to break in new rings. It's just my preference. And what happens is, because it's mixed with gasoline, which is also a cleaner, what you end up with is, when you go to wash the rings and the piston, the gasoline will get in those little crevices, and I got to turn on the fan here. The gasoline will get in those little crevices and clean them out pretty good, and it'll evaporate. Once it evaporates, there'll be a nice coating of ATF on it. So next time you or are out in the garage and you want to see how that works, well, just mix a little ATF or oil or whatever and with some gasoline, and you'll find out that it really, it works, So that's what I use. And I use that to wash the cylinders. I'll go in there with a rag, and I'll dump it in there and I'll wash the cylinders till they're clean. So you got no gray matter on the cloth. And what you end up with is a nice coating of clean ATF. So that's all ATF in the cylinder. So keeps it lubed, makes things happy. And this is, don't want to ramble on too much, so I'll get to it. I'm gonna dip this in the bucket. I'm gonna rotate the rings, make sure that they're washed out. Rotate the rings a couple of times. Make sure no dirt's underneath them. And that's it. I don't dry it or anything. I leave that gas and ATF on it, and when the gasoline evaporates, there's nothing but ATF left on it. So that's done. I'll do the cap. And the bearings. I get all this extra cleaner off. Let's just call it cleaner. And I'll just do the bearing surfaces and the cap where it attaches to the connecting rod. And what I have in this little cup here is acetone. I'll use acetone to clean where the bearings go. It evaporates fast, so that's a plus. And I'll use a new position on the rag every time, so it's clean. You want to get this as clean as possible. And after doing this for a little bit, you just kind of pick up on what works for you. And I really don't worry about acetoning the actual wear surface of the bearing. I just make sure I clean the back of it real good and try not to touch the back of it after I clean it, just the sides. And I won't set that on the bench after I clean it. I'll just directly put it in. I like to push a little bit on the bearing here to help it go in so it's not grinding against the connecting rod. Squeeze a little bit of this, and one dab, that's it. Put that to the side, get the cap going. Bearing. And I keep my pistons in these 2-liter carriers. I got these from Papa John's. They were going to throw them away, and I was like, oh, there's 8. There's V8. Put 2 and 2 together. I'll take a couple of those. So I grabbed a couple while I was there. You know, you can't be too clean with this stuff. So, now, the way I arrange my rings on here is, so here's your quench pad. I'll put, this is the top of this is facing towards the intake, right here. So what I'll do is I'll put the compression ring at the bottom, the second compression ring at the top, and the way I orientate the oil ring is I put W, make a W with it where it breaks, and the way I remember it is just the W for win. And I'll orientate the oil ring with the top, kind of just stagger them a little bit. But the top oil ring, what I'll do is I'll stagger those at the top. So the bottom one points towards the front of the engine, and the top one points towards the rear of the engine. So I'll have, let's see, the actual gaps in the oil ring are at, let's just say, 2 and 10 o'clock. Okay, and the top compression is at relatively 6, somewhere around there, and the actual the oil ring in the middle there, have that towards, I gotta move that, have that towards the bottom, just make sure that these are okay. And as soon as you got that, so you got the W away from the quench pad, and the top compression ring away from the quench pad. The second compression ring is at the top of the quench pad, and the actual oil rings, the brakes in them, or the gaps, are pointing in this direction. And I'll just take my tool, put it inside, and get the skirt to show. Once the skirt shows, I make sure that the orientation's right for where it's going to sit on the crank. The journal or the cheek is on this side, so the cutout, the radius goes over here. I'll get all that lined up. I'll put the skirt in the bore, firmly press the ring compressor up against the engine block, and I will move the connecting rod towards the other connecting rod. And one thing I forgot to do is turn the crank. It's important to turn the crank and get that get that rod journal away from where you're going to be installing the piston, and the connecting rod's going to be sliding through the bore, because you don't want to nick that surface. So I'm going to spin the engine over, crude but effective way. Make sure that's all lined up. Now you want to hold this ring compressor firmly against the deck of the block and just tap the piston in. Once it's in, grab the connecting rod where the bolt goes into, hold it up, tap the piston in, line it up. Sometimes you'll have to turn it a little. Just got to move it over a tad. Just a tad. Until it seats. Make sure you didn't disturb the bearing. Cap in place. Make sure you got some ARP lube on the flange and threads of the bolt. Flange area and the threads. It's a hot one today. Whew. And I like to actually put these engines together when it's raining, and it's fixing to rain again, and it's been raining the last day or so, and that helps keep the dust down and the dust from collecting. So, and that's it. It's basically it's all assembled, the lower end's assembled, and I'm gonna make sure that these cylinders are just cleaned once again. Tops of the pistons are clean, and just kind of go over it. When I go to torque these, what I do is, since these have ARP bolts, I will actually dial caliper these and stretch them that way. I think I did a video on that a while back with the blower engine, but that's how I did the blower engine ones. I put a dial caliper on it and I measured it, and I measured for the bolt stretch. So yeah, that's about it. Now I will say this, when you go to stretch the bolts, it is not the torque specifications for ARP. You can do the torque specifications, but just be aware it's not the same. When you actually, the bolts that are in the rat rod engine there with the supercharger on it, I think it came to like, I think it was 65 foot-pounds for the ARP bolts, but after you get done stretching the bolt, it actually came out to 84 foot-pounds. So just be aware of that. The actual stretch is different from torque. And that's it. I mean, it's pretty simple. You do it 8 more times, and that's it. That's it. I mean, it's basically done. Clean all the markings up. The oil pump, I sleeved the oil pump here, okay? There's actual there's actual casings in there. Okay, I forget what size bullet, but there's actual casings in there to make a tighter fit on the bolt. And the reason why I do that is so I can actually, the opening here and the opening here is identical, and that's how you match them up. You put the casings in there, you put the bolt in, you torque it down, and well, before you do that, you put like a marking compound down here, whether it's sealer, whether it's gasket material, whether it's Loctite, whatever you want to use, thread sealer. You put it on there, you put this on, you torque it down, and you take it apart again, and it'll leave the outline of where you wanna pour. This is a standard volume, and I did increase the pressure by getting a 41/64 freeze plug. The original plug that goes in here is real shallow, but if you get a 41/64 freeze plug and press it in there, it'll actually raise the pressure 15 pounds. And you can stack washers or however you want to do it, but don't stack too much because it does have to bypass, so just be aware of that. You got to have that bypass valve be able to float back and forth. So that's that. I mean, not really much to go over here. That's just how I do it and how I go about assembling or putting the rods and pistons in the block. That's it.